Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I am going to showcase the power and potential of adapted learning in CME using ACHL's AdaptEd platform. So I think it's safe to say that we all have seen the impact of technology and how it's transformed our society, our way of life, and really how it's impacted how education is delivered. Personalized education has been at the center of attention in CME for years. It offers flexible learning pathways. We can accommodate diverse learning needs and preferences. But what I see more often is that personalized learning programming has been developed, it tends to be one-dimensional, where the content is prepackaged into pathways or buckets that unfold based upon decisions that the learner makes. But there's no variation to accommodate the acumen or the learning needs of the clinician. So while it's personalized to a degree, it definitely leaves an opportunity for more individualized learning. What we're going to show you in this presentation is how sophisticated logic and AI technology platform led to educational gains. So the program that we developed was a curriculum with ACHL AdaptEd platform central to the curriculum. The AdaptEd platform was comprised of two modules. One was on atopic derm and one was on psoriasis. Upon completion, we then directed learners to supplemental activities, and the two supplemental activities were more traditional in nature. One was a case-based program and one was a little bit more of a didactic program. And we used those supplemental pieces at the analysis phase to compare our adapted learning impact compared to the traditional CME. So drilling down right into the adapted platform, as I mentioned, there was two modules. When a learner came into the program, they were able to self-select which module they wanted to start with. And then they identified themselves as either a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced level clinician in managing and treating either atopic derm or psoriasis. Now, each module had 8 domains: pathophysiology, treatment, diagnosis, emerging therapies, and the content covered each of those domains. So at the outset, the clinicians were exposed to content that was aligned to their initial self-identified acumen. But as they were progressing and were being exposed to content, the content would adapt based upon how they were answering these questions. If their responses were consistent with their knowledge level, they stayed where they were. If they were showing that they actually were managing the content appropriately and they were correctly answering the questions, they would be promoted. On the flip side, if a learner came in at the advanced level and wasn't able to correctly progress through the activity, answer questions correctly, they were demoted to a more beginner level content and then shown appropriate level education. The value add to this is, again, learners didn't necessarily need to see content that they were mastered in. So if someone had shown mastery in a topic area or a domain, they could test out of it. So what you see on this slide is a snapshot of an immensely complex learning experience that adapts, again, to the needs of the learner. Throughout the platform, as they are answering questions, as they're being exposed to content, they're never shown how they performed. They're not labeled, so to speak, as an advanced learner because we don't want to influence their decisions in any way. And basically, because of the multi-dimensional aspects of the platform, a learner can come in several times and be exposed to new content every single time. Again, as I mentioned, there was 2 supplemental activities, and these 2 activities were developed in more of a traditional format with an interactive case-based program, and then a derm brief, which took the approach of a expert faculty offering some real-world guidance and context that could be applied in everyday practice. And these two activities, as I mentioned before, were used as comparators to the impact of the AdaptEd learning platform. So let's get into the impact. Some factors that we looked at to measure the success of the curriculum and of the adapted learning platform include the ability to grab and retain the advanced learner. Now, in our case, our advanced learners were dermatologists. We wanted to make sure that we were targeting the dermatologists and providing them education that was appropriate to their learning level. Another success factor was the ability to increase confidence compared to more traditional CME, as well as the ability to increase engagement compared to non-adaptive programming. And then lastly, we were looking to see an increase with a stronger effect size, as well as an increase in clinical changes. So I'm sure some of you are wondering where learners fell in this activity. Were their skills validated? Were they overly confident? Occasionally throughout the deck, you might see reference to a Dunningkruger effect. And essentially that is it's when someone's confidence exceeds their ability. In more simpler terms, it basically is when someone thinks they're smarter and have more skills than they actually have. So let's take a look. This is a pretty straightforward snapshot of our participation with the 6 months worth of data. The activity on the bottom, number 3, is our AdaptEd learning platform. And you can see it broken out by each of the modules. Right now, our participation and engagement is meeting our expectations. So what we're showing on this slide here is the 3 skill levels. The beginners are represented in purple, intermediate is represented in orange, and the advanced clinicians are represented in blue, as well as the associated demographics. Not surprising, the advanced cohort was largely comprised of dermatologists. So these radiographs look complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. What we're showing here is a percent from which the learners deviated from their self-identified skill levels in the atopic derm module. So surprisingly, what we saw was the beginner and intermediate dermatology learners outperformed their skill sets and demonstrated higher levels of knowledge across all 8 domains. So that basically means that the beginner, self-identified beginner dermatologists tended to be promoted to the higher level of content across all 8 of the domains. The self-identified advanced learner dermatologists generally were consistent with their performance. They stayed at the advanced level. However, there was a little bit of demotion in the areas, oddly enough, of treatment, pathophysiology, and epidemiology. When we look at the other HCPs, the graph on the right, you'll see there was a greater amount of overconfidence in the advanced learner cohort in all areas besides diagnosis. So this slide, it does look like the slide before it, but this one is reflective of the psoriasis module. And what you'll see again is another big discrepancy in the dermatology and non-dermatology HCPs in the advanced cohort. The graph on the right, you'll see that non-dermatologists were overly confident and were demoted to the beginner level in each domain. When you look at the graph on the left in the dermatology learners, specifically at the advanced cohort, you'll see the deviation is more pronounced compared to the atopic derm module. And what's most surprising is that the greatest deviation is in the treatment domain. So now we'll look at the impact on clinicians' confidence. What we're showing here is an overall shift in 54% in confidence with diagnosis and treating atopic derm. When we looked further, we saw some of the greatest gains across the beginner cohorts, regardless of their specialty. And while the advanced population did see a couple decreases, specifically among the dermatologists and family medicine practitioners, We surmise that these decreases speak to the sophistication of the content and helping clinicians realize their own practice gaps. Often what we see in CME is that education is created as a one-size-fits-all model. And when one-size-fits-all is applied, you often miss the mark and miss the needs for those advanced learners. They don't always find utility in the programming. In this case, we do believe that the advanced learners found education that challenged them and caused them to truly reflect on their self-identified skills and confidence. This graph is representing the atopic derm module. And what we see here is the same phenomenon with increases among the beginner and intermediate level and mild decline in the advanced learner cohort. But it is interesting to note that regardless of the confidence gains, when we overlaid knowledge gains with the platform, we saw an increase across the board from baseline to post-test with an average of about 40 percentage points. So now let's take a look at the engagement in the platform and see how that related to the impact of the activity. What we're showing here is the beginner and intermediate cohort. And you'll see that there's a positive relationship between the time spent in the activity and the learner's ability to surpass their self-assessed skill. So essentially what we're showing here is that the more time spent in the activity, the greater likelihood of being promoted to a higher level, more challenging content. Now, this graph, what you're seeing is the advanced learner and time in the activity versus demotion. So when the advanced learner comes in, the only place they can go is down. They can be demoted. So what we're showing is the orange bars are representing where they landed at the end of the activity. Before, we saw that the more time in the activity led to higher success and impact. What we're seeing here is among the advanced learners, the less time in a domain, the more likely they were to be demoted. So let's take a look at the overall impact of the activity and consider it against the two traditional CME activities that were offered to clinicians. Generally, what we were looking at with the Cohen's d effect size was the percent non-overlap, which indicates how much more knowledgeable learners are after participating in the activity. What we found was regardless of acumen, the AdaptEd learning platform demonstrated the greatest educational gains compared to traditional CME activities. This graph is looking closer now at confidence gains. And what we saw, once again, that AdaptEd was more effective at increasing confidence levels among learners compared to the traditional activities. The following few slides that we're going to go into are really self-reported outcomes that we pulled from our evaluation. Again, this was our 6-month interim. We do look forward to creating a focus group that's going to allow us to get some more feedback. But what we're going to show is basically that physicians are reinforcing our findings. What they've indicated was that, yes, the activity did increase their knowledge, their confidence, and their performance, as well as their anticipated patient outcomes. What I like about the practice change slide was we did have a large percentage, 86% of clinicians indicate that they would change their practice as a result of this activity. Some of the areas that jumped out at me were a increase, 44% intend to refer to a specialist sooner, and 39% will consider biologic therapies earlier in the management of patients with atopic derm or psoriasis. I think one of the more telling pieces of the self-reported outcomes are the patient impact. And essentially what we're showing here are the changes that may impact children with atopic derm and adults. it looks like approximately 3,500 children and 3,800 adults each month will be impacted by this activity. And this is based on the clinicians who indicate that they would make a change as a result of participating in this program. So I want to thank you for your time today. I really look forward to some time answering questions, and I hope that I'll be able to continue this discussion and expand on anything further with you. Thank you for your time and have a great day.